rocking and rolling. All right.
How are we doing?
Everything's looking good, looking good. It's official.
Always feels like we're in mission control for like NASA and blasting off.
Gotta have a little pre-show, make sure everything's all working and jiving and doing all kinds of good stuff. Happy post Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Happy post Thanksgiving to you. Feels like are we on?
Oh yeah, we're on.
Are we pre-showing?
We're pre-showing.
This is like that's why it's Tuesday.
I've only got to button down a little bit because it's the pre-show.
Yeah, it's a little looser. It's a little it's a little more cash in the pre-show.
Casual. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everyone, well, I won't speak for everyone. I'll speak for myself and some other people I talk to, but coming back from holidays, those Mondays are always rough, and now we're coming back. This is like the Monday of the No Fucks Given podcast, since it's the first one since the holiday.
Yeah, well, we took 2 weeks off.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Gotta get our groove back.
Gotta get the groove back, get the music going. There we go. It's a good anchor to get your groove back.
Yeah, exactly. It is a good anchor.
Yeah. So you got plans for December yet? What you're doing?
Well, if the world doesn't change, the plan is just to go up and see the family around Christmas.
Okay.
Head up your way.
Yeah, and I'll
see the family.
I'll be heading past you all the way to SoCal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, be down there for a week.
Which part?
Long Beach.
So, the LBC. That's where my mother was born.
Oh, really?
No.
It has probably changed a little bit since she was born there.
You know, I honestly know nothing about Long Beach other than what I learned from Snoop Dogg albums when I was a teenager. It's funny. It's not even a joke though. That's my extent of what I know about Long Beach.
Yeah, that's kind of like if that's all you know, then yeah, that's all you know.
Yeah,
it's not bad. It's interesting.
I know Snoop Dogg's interpretation of the LBC from Doggy Style, an iconic rap album of my childhood.
Yeah. It is interesting because it is they've drilled oil for years down there. So they have, the oil pumps that do this, look like a crane or something.
Mm-hmm.
And anyhow, welcome to the live show. Yeah. So anyhow, when you're driving around Long Beach, oftentimes there are buildings that are not buildings, but they're just a facade because behind it is an oil pump that is pumping oil.
Really?
So, yeah.
I knew they were doing that down there. I didn't know they covered it up with fake houses.
Yeah, you could be just cruising along and there'll be a building there with no windows, and it's like, no, it's probably an oil pump.
That's fascinating. It's got to be a metaphor there somewhere for something.
Yeah, I was going to say apparently it never made it into the Snoop Dogg album though, as he was rolling down Sunset. But Sunset's that's Hollywood anyway. So anyway, I digress.
Rolling down the street with all the fabricated houses covering up oil drilling operations.
Yeah,
something. That sounds vaguely familiar from my youth.
Yeah. So welcome everybody. We took the last 2 weeks off. It's good to be back on the air live with my buddy Will Cordonley. I'm Ryan Perry. This is the No Fucks Given podcast. And one of these days I'll actually have a separate show producer who will know how to hit the button at the right time. Or I just need to not think about it and it'll probably happen correctly. And so
Pretty-
we're rolling into holidays, folks. It is. I thought our first show was going to be in December, but it's actually our first show back was going to be in December, but here it is. It's still November. We're just barely hanging on to November. Tomorrow will be December 1st. And then what, two shows, and then we'll be rolling into 2022, ringing in the new year and talking about everybody's favorite things. I'm sure we'll have some conversations around New Year's resolutions, how to, people take a lot of action, it seems like, in the first quarter of a new year. So might be a good time to talk about that. We've also talked, Will and I have talked behind the scenes of kind of what it's going to be like, some tips and tricks on how to navigate family situations during the holidays, because that always seems to be kind of a stressful time for many people. I know I just spent a couple of weeks away, and it's like, yeah, with some family, it's nice to be able to just have a quick visit and get in and out. And I know some people have hard times even just going over for a dinner can be quite
Yeah.
stressful. But today, we're not going to talk about any of that. We're just kind of alluding to what to expect in coming shows. Today is going to be kind of one of those puzzling pieces of being human, I think. And that is, some people will label it as self-sabotage as you become successful. It's like, what is that thing that happens, and why is it that so many people who truly want to be successful struggle with it?
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you actually read about, listen to, or talk to people who we would describe as successful or conventionally successful, you'll learn. I don't know everyone who's ever existed, so I'll say 99.9% of the time instead of 100% of the time that they hit all kinds of struggles, roadblocks, setbacks, and all kinds of crazy stuff in their lives.
Right.
But what makes the headlines is how much money or how much impact they've had. It doesn't
Right.
really make the headlines, the journey, so to speak.
Correct. Right.
So it's interesting. It seems to be a almost an innate human thing, not so much why is it so hard for me kind of thing when it comes to setting our own goals and achieving them.
Yeah, very much so. Otherwise, there would be many more happy, successful people. And success, by the way, that everybody has its own terminology for success. So some people might equate it to public notoriety. Some people might equate it to money. Some people might equate it to how many offices they have worldwide in their business, or how many employees they have, and what their revenue is for their business. And other people might just find it as I'm a happy person. There's and often it seems that you see pictures and people who travel, and they end up in third world countries where it's like, oh, they don't have an electricity and they struggle for water, and there's no electronics, and typically it's the women that have to travel 2 miles every day with a 5-gallon bucket on their head to get water for the family in some of these countries. And yet you look around and everybody's happy. They're giggling, they're laughing, they're excited. And a lot of people would say that they're in an impoverished situation, and yet they're very happy. And then you see other people on the flip side who may not be as happy, even though they're quote unquote successful from the outside. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, it's good to parse that out because I think we're gonna, at some point, we'll talk about defining success for yourself, because I really think there's a good conventional way to look at it, and that's useful. And then there's also, everyone's kind of unique and has their own goals. So it's useful to know if success means, zero, like how many zeros are in your bank account, or if it's that you don't feel as stressed and as anxious as you used to. And it could be both things. So it's important for people to do that. as part of what you're saying, but also we might just parse out the idea that um, success is not necessarily equal to happiness, and it's not
Yeah.
necessarily equal to fulfillment either.
Right.
Although all three of those things can absolutely affect each other, just depending.
Right. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of people, I don't know what the percentage is, but I think a fair number of people don't truly know what they want. So they have an idea of what success might be. And if we take the easy equation of money, financial, excuse me, um, a financial equation. Okay, well, I'm only making 100,000 this year. I want to make 250,000, then I want to make a 500,000, and ultimately, I want to generate $1 million in revenue every year. That doesn't account for all other aspects of their life necessarily, if that's all they're focused on. What about their personal health and well-being, mental happiness, relationship with family, especially if you are married or in a committed relationship, as an example, or have kids. How much time and energy are you going to be able to give to them, vacations, all those other things. So I think, yes, defining success is very important. And a lot of people, one of the items that they bump up against is that, oh, I thought if I had this money, which equals success in my mind, then I'm going to be happy, or then the family will be happy. My wife will be proud of me, as an example. Or if you're single, a lot of times, oh, then I'm in a place where I'd be a good bachelor, as an example. Just using some generic framework, if you will, for
Yeah.
those types of things. And most of the time, it seems like that doesn't happen.
It certainly can, but I would agree most of the time, if not almost constantly, the the I'll guess it seems innate, so we'll just call it that, although I could be wrong. The innate human thing to say, when this, then that kind
Mm-hmm.
of equation in our lives almost never seems to be true.
Right.
When I'm rich, then I'll be happy.
Right.
You know, if, when this happens, then this will also happen. Although it can. I think there's a lot of debate around money, and money can't buy happiness, and I
Right.
would say it certainly can affect it. And I would say if you
Right.
can't pay your bill, then you're at a level of stress that absolutely affects things in your life. And when
Yeah.
things are handled that way, it's better. I think they're also starting to debate that idea that in America they have and it depends on which part of America, but the idea that any money you make up to $70,000 will
Mm,
impact your well-being and your happiness
right.
directly. Like there's a correlation between that, and then after $70,000, there's very little correlation between
Right.
your income and your happiness and
It's
your
kind of
you
like
can
a diminishing return on happiness.
yeah.
Once you exceed 70K, it's like, all right, you could work twice as hard to make 140, as an example, but you might only get a half a percent incremental increase in happiness. So is it worth
Yeah,
all the issues?
it
Yeah.
just depends. I don't know how they ever figured that out in the first place. It seems
Right.
kind of arbitrary. And in the Bay Area, certainly, the numbers are different than
Right.
that. But um, when it comes to defining success for yourself, like kind of make sure you know the outcomes that are going to come from what you believe you want, because that's kind of, we talk a lot about that on this. So
Right.
when you get this, when you make more money, what will having that do for you, right?
Right.
That kind of idea. What are the secondary outcomes that are important to you for that?
Right. And I would say with that is those answers, you want to get to an emotional level. So if the answer is, oh, when I have that money, I'll be able to buy a house. Okay, great. What will having that do for you? Well, I'll have safety and protection, or, you know,
Mhm.
I'll be the first person in my family to ever own a house. So, it's really identifying those motivating features, or the motivating feelings that drive everything. And I think this is probably one of the reasons. There's a couple of key reasons, but I think one of it is that a lot of people, there's the old cartoon where people think that success, you just go from A to B, and then it shows,
Hmm.
and it's just a big squiggly line of what it takes to get to be quote unquote successful, whatever that is for you.
Yeah.
And that means there are going to be those rough days. There's going to be those days maybe you don't want to get out of bed necessarily. There may
Hmm.
be those days where you're like, oh, I thought I was so close to landing that new contract, as an example, and that was going to give the myself and the business the boost that we needed to get to the next level to be successful. And for whatever reason, it falls through. And so having that perseverance, if you go back to Simon Sinek, understanding your why, I think this is all kind of very important. Is
Hmm.
why are you doing this, not on a superficial level, but on an emotional level? So if your whole goal is to earn an extra $20,000 next year so you can put away for a house, but the reason for buying a house, as an example, you just want to do it because that's what everybody does. It's the American dream. I'm supposed to buy a house, but I'm really not attached to it because I'd really rather do this van life thing, or I'd rather take that money and maybe do a nice vacation somewhere.
Hmm.
It's going to be hard to stick with your goal and to have the quote unquote success that you want if you aren't really committed emotionally to that goal or whatever that successful outcome is that you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, and it may not even be committed to. It might just be it doesn't light up the circuits in your brain enough to
Right.
last as long as it needs to meet a big goal, like something that would take you a year, or amassing the finances to buy a house, something like that. Or if you don't understand these, as you said, these lower level or emotional drivers, and if they're not there, then you'll start bumping into conflict between kind of your conscious thinking mind and your unconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to either, as we talk, lead to lack of motivation, self-sabotage, kind of bumpier roads. And that's what we're going to talk here today about. It's like, well, how does it happen that all these humans seem to strive for, work towards goals in their life, success in their life, and kind of come up against obstacles, strife,
Right.
unpredictable challenges that need to be surmounted? And
Right.
it kind of is like the tale as old as time a little bit. It's like
Right.
everyone kind of runs their own version of the Odyssey when
Yeah.
they set out to accomplish something meaningful in their lives.
Yeah. Which is
And
probably why people love the underdog so much, because the underdog rarely wins. And it's like, oh, yes, there is hope that I could be, the underdog that actually breaks through and has success. Um,
mhm,
and I think the other thing that's really important when you bring that up is understanding that this is not about you as an individual. I mean, it is because it's you, but this is bigger than you. This is kind of the human coding. We talk about patterns a lot because we all replicate patterns. There's even, I don't know if I think we talked about the four turnings, and I thought it was interesting where the gentleman talked about the four turnings, where the United States specifically and other countries throughout the world have this 80-year cycle that has been repeated over time, over hundreds of years, of very successful times and then very not very successful times, and the fourth turning, which is the last 20 years in the 80-year cycle, is
mhm,
kind of the shit year, or the shit cycle, if you will. It's called the fourth turning.
mhm.
And this philosopher, I forget his name, but said it started in 2008, the fourth turning. And that's why we're in this, I call it the shit cycle or the fourth turning. So somewhere around 2028, 2030, that's when everybody, hopefully we kind of get smacked around a little bit emotionally, and we go, we could do better, folks. And then we do better, and that ends up being the first turning, the first
Oh,
20-year
okay.
cycle of an 80-year cycle.
Mhm.
And then everything is more positive. And it's not that the world's perfect or anything, but there is a time of prosperity where universally most people are moving forward. They're having success. They're feeling good. And then the second turning, which would be years 21 to 40, it starts tapering off a little bit. People are kind of, hey, life is good. Don't worry about it. Don't rock the boat. Yeah, some things are going bad. Yeah. And then you have your third turning where it's really starting to go. And then the fourth turning is when, all right, the ship is sinking. We need to fix this. Otherwise, it's going to get really bad. And then we all come together. So there's patterns, there's cycles that are in all of us, and they're not unique to us, and except for the fact that we are each unique. But these are patterns that have been going on for thousands of years across all humans. And
Yeah,
I'm
it's
sure you could
interesting
nail.
how
Go ahead.
I say it's interesting how people kind of run patterns and cycles uniquely inside themselves and in their lives, and then that, I mean, that's an interesting theory, or the way like the fourth turning and all that stuff, and then also there's the way history repeats itself collectively. That's just interesting how we do things individually and collectively all at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah. And
Very interesting.
if you look around nature, everything is a pattern. May it be a leaf on a tree, that leaf, that pattern repeats all over in nature. So it's very natural. And I think ultimately what I'm trying to say is that if you're feeling bad about yourself or frustrated, which a lot of people do, I know I've been there, is that this is a condition of being human. This is not a condition of being you, and that there are choices. You can affect change. And that's what we want to talk about a little bit today on the show, and also talk about, well, why is it so hard to change? Why is it so hard to break the pattern? What are these invisible things that pop up emotionally for us where we end up, and I think self-sabotage is kind of a universally known word, and how many people have experienced it themselves or know somebody who was on that trajectory towards success, whatever it may be, and then halfway, three-quarters, somewhere along the line, it's like, why did you do that? Why, you're such an idiot that, you were on the way and all you had to do was dun, 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 and boom. And yet they don't. Lottery
Fumble the
winners.
ball on the 1 yard line.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Especially when you're showboating, it's like there's nobody behind you for 20 yards and you showboat, and then some guy comes out of the corner that you didn't see and tackles and takes the football out of your hands and then scores a touchdown on the other side. It's like, no, it's like these are some of the patterns that we're talking about that show up that consciously we're not aware of. So how does this happen, Will? How is it that we have these patterns that show up all the time? They've been showing up for thousands of years in all people of all wealth, all backgrounds, all societies, all cultures. It literally is part of the human brain. It's not a cultural thing.
Yep.
While culture does have impact, yes, but we're talking, it's so built into the human experience that it doesn't matter where you're born, when you were born. You could have been born in the 1600s. You're going to be affected by this. You could be born 100 years from now. You're still going to be affected by this. So what is it that happens? Why can't we just wake up, be successful, do the things that we know we're supposed to do? Because damn it, I'm getting tired of this.
Anyone who got the answer?
Who got the
God,
answer?
I don't know. That's a huge
answer.
question. I don't know. I think philosophers have been chewing on that for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Or probably mystics before that, and forever. Sure. It's like, why is it this way? I don't know. I would guess part of it is it makes it Well, the fact that we have to strive for things that we want, that they don't come easy, and when things that we want come easy, it also kind of comes with problems that are unpredictable. Just
Right.
kind of the way that seems to work like that as a general statement about life.
Right. In the sense that the
I
brain
don't
has
really.
already predetermined what, well, not predetermined, but by the age of 3,
Yeah.
it's kind of determined your individual role in the world, and it has a
Yep.
view on how the world's supposed to be.
Mhm.
So if things are supposed to be hard, then your brain is
Mhm.
going to naturally find ways to make things difficult for you.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I think this all plays out for humans in all time because everyone was born. We can just say that safely.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has a mother and a father. We can say that safely, even if you've never met them. Everyone has a mother and a father biologically.
All right.
And we inherit stuff kind of epigenetically. We kind of, I don't know if it's been written somewhere. If it has, I'd like to read it. But I kind of just have this theory that being born is inherently traumatic, and that has an effect on us. We're
You talking about the actual
just
birthing process
just the
itself when you
actual
say born?
birthing
Yeah.
process. Yeah, I don't know how much of it does or doesn't have an effect, but when I think about it, when I think about what the experience of being in warm amniotic fluid and getting fed 3 squares a day, having everything handled for you as a fetus, and then the trauma of being pushed out of that into this confusing, harsh world,
Right.
it just kind of lands metaphorically like the story of Adam and Eve to me, getting kicked out of heaven kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have that in common. And, babies, the adrenaline levels of babies is like 3 times higher than an adult having a heart attack. They've measured these biochemically. It's something to that effect. So like your stress hormones are running out of control as a baby when you're being birthed as well.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know, we all have these kind of uh, collective things that we share. Oh, a lot of people's lives are completely unique and have all kinds of differentiations, and then there's some things that are just the same for everyone, and they have an
Right.
impact on us. And as you said, when you start looking at the brain from childhood development perspective, a lot of our understandings of ourself and our life at large and how other people are as a general statement, a lot of those have been put in place already. Our beliefs and our identity as we relate to our beliefs around these things are mostly set inside of our minds and patterned by the age of 3, somewhere between being a fetus and 5 years old was a general statement.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes this stuff, it doesn't just work itself out naturally. If there's a belief and a part of our identity that is so highly valued by the system because it keeps us safe, the parts of us, as we talked about this, the creature neurology inside of us that's responsible for keeping us safe and keeping blood pressure and respiration going, it doesn't have the ability to calculate fulfillment or enjoyment of life or
Right.
like how any of this stuff happens. So,
Yeah. It just don't
and it
care,
also,
folks. It doesn't
I
care
don't
if you're
even know if
happy. It
it
doesn't care
cares.
if you're sad. Yeah, it
I
just
just don't
doesn't
even
have
know if
that.
it knows
Right.
how to calculate it.
Yeah.
Basically, it's
Yeah.
just it just has a binary view of things. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, are you alive or are you dead?
Right.
And anything that keeps you alive is valuable.
Yes.
And you know if some sort of belief that other people are scary and dangerous and you are at the effect of them keeps you alive because it gets you to kind of turn inward and wilt a bit and get away from people, then that's highly valued by the brain to keep you alive.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't think about that 20 years has passed and you're in a different situation now. It doesn't have the capacity to make those
Right.
calculations.
So, if we were to give an example to people, I think one of the easiest ones is if you grew up in a very abusive household, may it be physical and or emotional abuse,
Mhm.
and especially when it's not, you don't know what you're going to get, because a lot of times there are plenty of stories of people who have helped people, worked with people, and they could tell by the way the car door closed when dad came home, as an example, as to, oh, is this going to be an okay night, or do I need to hide in the bedroom type of a deal? And in those typically physically and verbally abusive households, the only way to survive is literally to either escape the body, or, like you were saying, you just kind of turn inward so that you're not seen. And that is a safety mechanism that an individual learned at a very early age, that in order to survive, this is how you have to behave and live in the world.
Yeah, like a like a full-on freeze response almost, or like children a lot of the time, as you say, in hostile or chaotic environments, they don't have the option to flee or fight.
Right.
It just, the system has those options, but when it's under stress and it runs through its options, as a kid, you really can't fight when you're too small. You
Yep.
can't really flee because it kind of just won't matter. So they do this kind of hyper freeze where it's almost like they disassociate from their body and try to be invisible while existing.
Right.
And somehow it kind of works sometimes. It's really
Yeah.
strange. But
Yeah.
but then it becomes a highly valued state for the system because it kept you safe and it kept you alive through all kinds of shock and trauma and stuff. And then you grow up and your critter brain doesn't, as you say, it doesn't calculate your happiness and it doesn't do time. So it kind of just floats in this timeless space of just repeating what works.
Right.
You have to retrain it to work in a different way.
Right. And I think that's where the big bump comes with people who, and when I say bump, it's the thing that we bump into quite a bit when we are moving towards success. It is that since New Year's is coming up, I'll use the analogy, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm committed myself, may it be waking up and doing yoga, exercising, a new diet to eat healthier, whatever it is. It could be shooting a new video once a week for your business, or doing something in your business, and you're motivated in the moment and it feels good and you do it. But then a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, 3 weeks go by, and we become unmotivated. I'm just not inspired anymore or motivated to do that. And and that's how we consciously understand what's going on. But unconsciously is really where, through this show and through any books or any learning that you do, is really focusing on the unconscious, because the unconscious is driving the emotions that make you feel unmotivated. And that typically is going to be that you are bumping up against something that the critter brain has simply deemed not survivable. And I'm not talking about like, oh, you're gonna literally die, but the critter brain is either survivable or not survivable. In any past experience, it knows how to survive that. And when you introduce new experiences that it has no reference for, those are going to automatically land in an unsurvivable column, because it has no reference on how to survive it. And the system is very black and white in this regard. So as you start moving into having what you want, enjoying life, having fun, as an example, making the money, working the hours that you want to do, eating the right foods, whatever right food is for you, or exercise, whatever it is. Once you start moving off what is known, that becomes scary. That becomes death-defyingly scary. And that's really what people who want success are bumping up against most of the time. Not all the time, but I would say it's a large percentage of the time.
Yeah, a lot of the time. And it's the critter brain, he said it, I was going to say it hates, but it's almost like hate has nothing to do with it. It just doesn't mess with things that are not like proven to be effective. So whenever
Right.
you're looking into a dark cave, the unpredictability of that just gets a no from the system.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're trying to do something you've never done in your life, and it will equate to some emotions inside of you that maybe used to be problematic as a kid, then it equates to some sort of like threat inside of the system.
Right.
Let's say we'll go back to that original example. If you grew up in a really hostile or abusive household, then chances are like feeling good about yourself or announcing your accomplishments didn't come with good things. And
Right.
this is where people are like, why would it? This is where it gets really confusing, the
Right.
idea that it feels bad for things to be good. That's one example of how this stuff gets trained up. It's like,
Right.
maybe you got all A's in school and you're proud of that, but being proud, makes mom and dad hostile because it threatens them because they're really kind of damaged inside and not doing so well emotionally, that
Right.
they feel threatened by their child, having better feelings than them.
Mm-hmm.
Then the nervous system learns that it just kind of associates this positive stuff with negative stuff, and it gets really confusing on the inside. And this is just
Well,
one
and it's
kind of
dangerous.
extreme example.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it becomes dangerous essentially. I mean, I've
yeah.
actually worked with, and I'm sure you have also,
Mhm.
individuals who you if you give them a compliment, they will get, I think angry is too strong of a word sometimes, but they
Mhm.
feel so uncomfortable by, and again, this is an emotional feeling.
Mhm.
Consciously, they might be okay with it, but emotionally, it feels really, really dangerous. And if we kind of take the extreme example, it is dangerous.
Mhm.
That if you give them a compliment that they've done something well, that to them, that equals danger.
Yeah.
And they will move away from that so fast because it's the same as asking them to jump off a cliff that's 1,000 feet in the air. Nobody in their right mind without a parachute or some sort of safety device would just jump off because that's instant death.
Yeah.
And to the critter brain, it's you're asking somebody to do that. And so if you're on the outside and you're working with, maybe you're friends with, or you know somebody who kind of reacts this way, and you're like, hello, I'm giving you a compliment. This is positive, for crying out loud. What's your
Mhm.
problem? It's always about their interpretation of what it is that you're saying that's most important, not what you're saying. And to them, if it's
Mhm.
danger, if that's the way their system equates it because of how they grew up and the environment that they grew up, then they're going to run from that. So imagine trying to be successful in whatever ways if any positive feedback you get is equals danger.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Or it just doesn't gel with your concept of yourself in the world, your
Right.
identity. And
Identity
there's so many
structure.
ways
Yeah.
this can happen, but it's like if someone runs some really, really deep self-hate or has, beliefs that they're fatally flawed, this really kind of classic beliefs and identities that come from traumatic upbringings and like traumatized families.
Right.
If you give them a compliment, it just doesn't gel with their self concept. And now you've kind of hurt your credibility with them because you're wrong for seeing good things in them
Right.
if they don't see, if they're lost the access to seeing the good things within themselves too. That becomes very threatening as well.
Right.
So this stuff can be tricky business. And
Yeah.
sometimes, we're kind of talking at things that are like a 9 out of 10, 8, 9, 10 out of 10. It's like,
Right.
it's even trickier to notice this when it runs at a 2 or a 3 out of 10 because
Right.
it's still really, really, really complicates life, but it's harder to kind of parse out what's going
Right.
on necessarily.
Yeah, and I think a good way of kind of parsing it out is that since we all run in patterns as humans, it's part of our core programming, is that if you reflect back on, or as you're moving forward, you notice, like, why do I keep on doing that? there's that one thing in life I keep on doing that's holding me back.
Hmm.
That one thing that's holding you back is that I call them invisible barriers. It's that you're bumping into something, but you cannot see it. And you're frustrated because consciously you're like, I want what's on the other side of that barrier, but there's this damn invisible barrier in the way. And it's like, what the fuck? Come on. And we get frustrated, and then we kind of tend to spiral down a little bit in frustration. Those are the areas where you want to look at the emotional state of what's going on, because emotionally your system is trying to protect you from something that it deems dangerous. And if we apply logic to any of this, if you try and logically figure out, oh, well, hold it, I just want to put a down payment on that nice new car, and every time I almost have the money, something happens and the money goes away. So what was it in my childhood about a new car that's preventing me from having? It's not the way it works. So
Yeah.
you can't make that logical connection. Typically it's the weirdest, most random things. When we work with people, one of our favorite things that I think both of us like to hear is, I don't know if this is relevant, but, and then they'll state something, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's like super important, because that's the unconscious, that's the stuff floating around in the background that's actually making all the decisions that we're not paying attention to consciously. That's the important thing, because once you identify what that is, now you have something to work with, so you can remove that barrier.
Mhm. And every once in a while, it's like one for one right on the nose. And that's always interesting
Yeah.
too, because that rarely happens, but it's
Right.
possible. Some people have new car trauma just because something traumatic happened with a new car,
Sure.
but very
That
likely it's
typically, yeah, it wouldn't
unrelated.
happen. It
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily happen at the age of 2, though. You know,
No.
but yeah, it could. It could, I guess.
Yeah.
All things are
Got a new
possible.
car, and that's when mom drove it off and never came back. Those
Right.
sort of things do
Right.
happen every
Yeah.
once in a while. But yeah, often, and this is why we talk about it's like it's really tricky being human, because we have these patterns and associations from childhood, and they often come with childlike language. They're kind of simple, and they're kind of uh, they're so all encompassing that it becomes really problematic when we become adults. Like, uh, if you grow up in a family where it was really chaotic and just kind of hard, and one day your mind just slides into the idea that life is hard because that's the experience right now,
Mm-hmm.
then you grow up, and as I said, critter brain doesn't do time, and it doesn't calculate happiness. So it doesn't matter that this belief that life is hard, which was a solution for problems as a kid. It
Right.
explained everything. Usually something like that comes with a cluster of a lot of other stuff too,
Right.
not just one thing. But all of a sudden, you're an adult having a really hard life in all kinds of confusing and seemingly random kind of ways, and you just can't explain it. And
Right.
it's because your brain's just doing what it's supposed to do, which is organize stuff in a way that's coherent and doesn't make you feel crazy, even though it feels awful.
Right.
But on some deeper level, it feels good. This is where it gets really, really interesting, where
Mm-hmm.
the brain's predictive function acting accurately comes with really, really good feelings. We don't get to experience them. They're mostly unconscious, but they're
Right.
absolutely there when we say, ah, I knew the person who I just started dating who I really liked, they're going to leave me, because that's what always happens,
Mm-hmm.
as an example. When it happens and our suspicions are confirmed, that is a really good day for the brain,
Right.
not for the human, but for the brain, that
Right.
it can predict life accurately and also potential threats accurately. It
Mm-hmm.
gets a good feeling that the system's working.
Right.
And that's really strange too. And that's
Yeah.
definitely in the mix of this as well.
Yeah.
But I
Because
like,
I was going to say the whole belief
Mhm.
reality loop that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, it's just kind of like if we think of the brain as a machine, which it's not, but just metaphorically, the machine gets a gold star when it predicts something and it turns out to be true. Like it gives
Right.
itself a gold star. That's a good thing. And then it subtly reinforces stuff too on a conscious and unconscious level. Right. It's hard to parse out what's the difference between our beliefs and our experience, because we have beliefs which cause experience, and we have experience which form and cause beliefs. And it kind of just becomes this either horrifying or virtuous cycle, however you want to look at it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I like the frame. I think this comes from Hollywood screenwriting. Or ever, people are familiar with the hero's journey, and then there's another concept that I've read a bit about that I like. It's called the hero's two journeys, and it's about how you write effective screenplays to make into movies that are entertaining, because there's a formula to this now, and if movies aren't entertaining, people aren't going to enjoy them or watch them.
You're
But
telling
we
me
have,
there's a pattern that people follow to make sure that people enjoy their movies?
yes, my friend, I'm telling you, there's a well-worn, repeatable pattern, apparently, a formula, if you will, to
Yes.
making movies, you know, flow in a way that stimulates the human mind and entertains them.
Mm-hmm.
But we have, the hero's journey, the journey, the external journey that people go on to find success or get what they want in life. And then there's the internal journey. So there's the two journeys that go on.
Mm-hmm.
There's the thing, and then there's the external movements toward attaining the thing, and then there's who the person is and who they have to grow and change into on the inside to
Right.
have and keep the thing that they want. I think that's really useful thing to keep in mind, and especially related to this, where it's like people have goals in their life and they set out to achieve them. And it's important to keep in mind who you have to grow and change into to have that, even if
Right.
you have no idea what that is. And oftentimes, like, why would you? When you're heading in new territory, it can be unpredictable,
Right.
especially emotionally. But just knowing that that is part of game, so to speak, is
Mm-hmm.
really important, because it's
Right.
not just, and we can pull up the kind of classic examples of someone wins the lottery, right? The tons of money falls out of the sky, and their life's completely different now on a dime. 1 second they were living one reality and they saw that they won, and now they're in a completely different reality. And then, of course, we should probably look this up, because we talk about this all the time, but it's some crazy number. What, like 90,
Oh,
80,
I thought I looked it
90% of
up last
lottery
time.
winners end up either in a worse, like in the same position or a worse position than they were 5 years after they won.
Right.
And that's the system, like, coming back to homeostasis. If you don't adjust who you are in relation to this new reality, then the system's
Right.
just going to find a way to get back to where it was. And that can take some time.
According to the New York Daily News, 70% of lottery winners end up broke within 7 years. Even worse,
Oh, it's
several winners
broke.
have died horribly or witnessed those close to them suffer. Dun, dun, dun.
Well,
70% within 7
it's a high
years.
percentage.
It's a
Well,
huge
that's
percentage.
end up broke. Yeah. So it's like, I thought it was 80 or 90, but it's 70% of end up in a worse position than they were in before. That's very strange.
Yeah. And that touches on a couple of different things, because one of the things that we talked about early on was kind of the patterns, and with where we're at in the show, I think we should kind of focus on that. But there's the patterning. There's the fact that at an early age, by the age of 3, typically, you have your critter brain, your unconscious mind has these beliefs about the world and yourself and how you fit in them and how you're going to survive in this environment that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
That 3-year-old lives with you all your entire life. In fact, you are living every version of yourself from conception
Yeah.
to whatever age you are. So all of those experiences and the things that make you feel are the ones that are the things that are trying to protect you. So when things feel bad, when you move towards something you want and you're getting there and it starts feeling bad, that is going to be one of those patterns that shows up. The other thing that kind of you're talking about, Will, and I think the lottery winner is a great example, is now identity. We have to maintain identity coherence. So imagine waking up one day with amnesia and not knowing anything about yourself, how utterly confusing that would be. I go mind blown. And it's kind of the same example, but not really. But a lot of the emotions and the way the brain works it out is that if you go from just barely surviving or being heavily in debt and almost losing, living in a car, and then all of a sudden you win $100 million, there is an identity coherence issue, because I am not a multimillionaire. That is not me. Especially if you have views about people with money that are not positive, that only people who are evil, only people who do bad things, whatever it is. If they're bad, people with money have bad intentions, and now you're that person, that is like, whoo, brain goes, identity issue, identity, alert, what's going on here? We cannot be that person. And yet money on its own is simply a tool. It doesn't actually affect who we are. It doesn't have to affect who we are. It's simply a tool. We can use that tool in any way that we want. But for a lot of people, they have a different feeling about money, and they give it more weight than it really has, unfortunately. And yeah, if you have identity issues, you are going to get rid of that money as quickly as possible. Maybe buying cars, giving money to charity. People find amazing ways of getting rid of money when they have too much. So, but I think that's identity coherence is kind of a topic for another day.
Yeah, well, it's always in the mix on this show, but
yeah.
We, as I said, when our minds predict things successfully, it comes with good feelings. That also kind of blows up into when our identity stays coherent, that comes with good feelings too. Because when we're having experiences that aren't coherent with who we are, it feels bad, even if they're positive experiences. It's very strange.
Yeah, and I think we've probably talked about this, but I think this is why a lot of people who become successful end up changing their names. So if you think about, and specifically around artists, maybe a musician or a movie star, if you will, I think somebody early on recognized that you need to kind of kill off that old version of you in order to become the version of you that you want. And so to help people along with that identity shift, it's like, okay, you can be Bob at home, but when you're out, you get to be this other person. You get to live the stage name. And then if that stage name and that persona, that identity becomes comfortable enough with you, then you're no longer Bob at home. You're Flash Jack or whatever it might be. I'm trying to pick some ridiculous names here.
Like Flash Jack, I like that. Yeah.
So anyway, there's all kinds of things going on. I would say, I don't know, Will, I'm curious what your thoughts are. I always like to go after the feelings first, though. Is one, try and identify if you are struggling, you recognize that, hey, I want to have more success than what I'm having right now, however that is in the ways that it shows up for you in the world. What is it that feels uncomfortable? At what point do you move towards something and it starts feeling uncomfortable? And can you, as you think back over time, has that showed up in the past? So this is not just like a new
Mm-hmm.
experience, but yeah, it seems like every time I get to bump, I have this feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That is kind of where you want to put your energy and direction into in order to identify how do you move forward to having the success that you want. Because if you get that out of the way, whatever that negative feeling is, once you work through that verbally, and I recommend having somebody on the outside work with you, maybe Will as an example, as a coach, great coach, myself or anybody else that you feel comfortable with, work through that. And I think that's going to be one of the easiest I don't know about easiest, but it's often the most identifiable thing that you can kind of
Mm-hmm.
start working on, if you will. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it happens enough. So it's like if you can kind of notice a one for one comparison in your experience from something where you're like, every time I get close to this, I do this. Be really,
Right.
feel fortunate that you're able to like identify it that directly. I mean, that's awesome. And having that awareness is really useful. And everyone should kind of put their attention on, it's like, well, I want this. And when I look back at my history of trying to attain it, what happened? And then you can
Mm-hmm.
maybe identify some sort of pattern or notice some sort of commonality. But a lot of the
Right.
time it's tricky, right? If you grew up in a chaotic family where feeling good about yourself or in general just wasn't allowed for whatever reason, whether it was because it was actively suppressed or if it was just kind of a family of, well, we just feel bad about ourselves and don't enjoy life here kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like having happiness and good feelings become unbearable. And it kind of just shows up in a generalized kind of way. So this is where, and that's as an adult, if you just don't, if you have it feel bad when you move towards things that are supposed to feel good in theory, that is a pattern, but it can
Mm-hmm.
be so general that it's hard to parse out sometimes.
Right.
That doesn't
Especially
mean
if
that
you've
this isn't
already,
what
I was going to say,
I would
especially
say.
if you've already calibrated that this is normal, right? If to you,
Yeah.
your experience, this is normal, so you may not know that it's not normal.
Mm.
And that's where working with somebody is really nice because somebody else might go, wow, that's normal for you, huh? And they can kind of give you some different perspectives. And when your
Mhm.
systems, your neurons have different perspectives, they tend to fire a little bit differently. And that's where you can kind of suss out maybe some things that are going on internally that are holding you back.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we have these things called mirroring neurons in our minds that are, I'm sure they showed up through evolution or maybe they were there from the beginning, but we're designed to learn from other humans really quickly in an unconscious way. And this is
Right.
why having a really, really good, safe, trustworthy friend or having a therapist or someone to work with becomes really useful because
Right.
your mind picks up on stuff from that person unconsciously that rewires and retrains the brain naturally.
Right.
It kind of was built from the idea of if you wanted to teach someone how to hunt back when we were tribal, that you could watch someone throw a spear and then you would know how to throw a spear just from watching someone else do it because our
Sure.
brains were kind of meant it's a huge evolutionary advantage that we have,
Right.
and it works the same way when we're retooling our patterns and our emotions as well. Because a lot of the time, I mean, in really abusive households, if you don't have a sense, if a child never has a like someone in their life or a counter experience to it, you just say, well, the brain just says, well, this is normal because it doesn't
Right.
have any data points to point against that.
Right.
And having someone or some sort of intervention to say, like, you know what, this isn't normal and this isn't right, that can change someone's life
Right.
completely.
Yeah.
Even, whether that's a school counselor or a neighbor or,
Yep.
you know, your friends' parents. It just kind of depends.
Right.
But yeah, we're designed to be influenced by each other for better or worse. So I would use that for having people around to use that for the better in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And having
And
that awareness inside yourself, and kind of, I'll just say it, for my money, what I see in the world and in my life and just in people who I know and who I don't know, it just seems like the Odyssey is like a timeless human experience. It's like when you set out to do something meaningful to you or go on a journey that you want, it just kind of goes like that for whatever reason.
mhm.
Because we're bumping up against our stuff internally and we're creating problems and we're creating roadblocks to be surmounted. And as Ryan was talking about earlier, it's like, if you're why are you doing this, if you're not totally aligned with that, or if it's not that strong, then you might just quit, and that might be the right move. It's like, I'm not, no finger wagging at quitting. It's like
Right.
quitting early for something that should be quit is a very, very important intervention.
Yep.
But if it's something that you're truly in line with and it's something that you truly want, then kind of preparing for some form of like ups and downs, and they don't have to be crazy or violent, is probably just a smart move, just
Mhm.
knowing that it's going to happen this way a bit. And when you listen to, let's say, like conventionally successful people talk, actors, business people, whatever, they all have this. I mean, everyone, like, no one had an easy road.
Right.
I don't, like, I would love,
Some are just easier than others. But
sure,
to call any of them easy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And why that is for us humans, I don't know. That you'd have to ask the whoever organized all this, but it seems to connect us to life and to each other in a certain way. Maybe that's why it's important.
Yeah. Well, and it gives us hope. And hope is a very powerful tool to have, because if you lose hope, then it's like, oh shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is true.
All right, cool. Well, any final thoughts to wrap this up?
Final thoughts. Well, I think every person kind of at some point either comes here knowing or discovers that there's something meaningful and important worth pursuing to them in their lives. And that could be so many. It's like, I don't know, you want to be an artist, or you want to be uh like run the UN. It's like everyone has their own kind of version of whatever it's meaning. Like maybe you want to be the best father ever or the best mother to your children. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what it is, but every kind of human being is this unique, like amazing organism and has this genius level operation inside them that maybe they have access to or don't have full access to. But
Right.
we all have stuff that's we want to pursue and is worth pursuing in our lives. And I think just keeping in mind that it may not be the easiest road, so being prepared is part of it.
Right.
It's kind of like, don't
And
set out to walk across the desert without bringing water. It's going to be
right.
hot. Just
Sure.
being kind of intentionally prepared is an important step.
Yeah. And when you are on that journey, wherever it is, maybe at the beginning, the middle, or I don't know, you never get to the end. This is a lifelong journey.
Mhm.
It's really about figuring out who you are, because the more alignment you are with your true self, however that is perceived as being right or wrong by yourself, by those that are close to you, family, friends, by the world, the more alignment you are with yourself, all of this gets much, much easier. And it's that journey can be a little bumpy because you've got to deal with some things and you've got to make some decisions about who that authentic version of you is. And how does the authentic version, not the actor who's currently playing you, because if you're not your authentic self, then you're just you're acting a part in order to live and survive in this world as you perceive it, as you feel that you need to be. And as you become really aligned with yourself, everything else just gets so much easier because you don't have to question things as much, if at all, because there's just a knowing that comes with it versus having to figure out, well, hold it. If I'm an actor in this part, how would I, as an actor, deal with these nuances? When you just know, because you are being who you are. I just came up with that. I was like, damn, good analogy. Pat myself on the back. Yeah, it just becomes much easier because you don't have to figure out how the role is. And if you don't have to figure out how I forget how many billion, we got 7 billion people on the earth are going to react to what you do, say, or feel. Life gets so much easier when you don't have to track all those people. You can just worry about yourself and what's most important for you.
Yeah. And I mean, you said the word, it's funny, it's been floating in and out of my mind this whole time. It's been elusive, but alignment is the name of the game, right? It's when who you are and what you're doing in the world aren't like causing friction inside of yourself or in your life, then that's when you just move towards things and it works out for you.
Yeah.
And that can be, I mean, getting there can be tricky, but I think that's like what could be more worthwhile to a human life than figuring out what you're aligned in and then having that kind of going through those motions.
Yeah.
Once you kind of started correctly.
Right. I think it's L'Oreal says, because you're worth it.
Oh.
To steal a line from L'Oreal. I don't know if it's that or CoverGirl.
I don't remember. That was some sort of makeup commercial when I was younger, though.
Yes.
Scary how much advertisements are like in there from long ago and far away.
Yeah.
It's almost like they have this putting things in human brains thing down to a science or something.
They do. I forget the guy's name that switched from psychology to marketing because he was like, oh my gosh, we could make millions of dollars in marketing if we just applied a little psychology to it all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I forget his name as well, but you are correct. It's like the father of modern advertising and marketing.
Yeah.
Was a psychologist.
Yeah. All righty, sir. Well, it's been fun. Hey, it's I feel good. I'm happy to be back on the live show with you. So thank you. Hope you enjoyed your time off as much as I did.
I did. It was nice. I don't know if I think I'm still landing back in normal life, but you know, I'm happy to be here too. It's always fun helping people. You know, part of our hero's journey for ourselves is helping people get in alignment and kind of navigating their own odysseys in their lives. And that feels really good.
Yeah, definitely. Next week, are we going to commit to talking about family and holidays and get-togethers and all that type of fun stuff?
What to do in the holidays.
What to do in the holidays. So we're going to talk about holidays. We might just end up just jibber jabbering about our own experiences, and we'll, but we're going to throw some nuggets of wisdom in there, because I mean, if there isn't a reliable pattern, then family, I don't know what is. I mean, families are the ones that taught you to be you. They're the ones that help form your identity. They help form your beliefs about the world, about yourself. Those patterns stay pretty darn consistent over the years. So I think it's a topic worth talking about.
So. It is.
All right, cool. Until next week then.
Until next week. Awesome. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah. Thank you, Will. Always appreciate it. We will be back. Next week is what I was trying to say. We'll be back at Tuesday at 10 o'clock, 10:15 in the morning Pacific time. Take care, everyone.